So any questions from the audience? Please.
I have a question regarding the usage of when we describe dance as Indonesian. May I know what is generally the meaning of that? Because Indonesia has got so many islands, covers so much territory that someone in Java, right, a Javanese might feel that he has something which is unique to offer compared with someone in Sumatra or Minangkabau, for instance. So when you use the word Indonesian, generally what's the accepted meaning of that?
Thank you so much. Maybe this one I will take the question. I mentioned that in 1965 I learned the Malay dances based on Indonesian style. So it is referring to the Sumatran. So the two choreographers who came to Singapore during that time was from Medan. And yes, I understand there's Javanese style. But for my case is referring to the Sumatran Malay dance. Thank you.
Any other interesting questions raised from the audience? Oh, please.
Thank you for the presentations. I'm not anywhere near to having any expertise in dance, but I particularly like the last presentation and your demonstrations. I mean, even though we talk about the digital kind of capturing of all the various parts of dance, nothing beats seeing the real thing. I was in Kerala last year and I saw the amount of time it took to put the makeup on for that show, and then to see the whole thing, plus understand all the gestures. It's almost like learning a new language. It's almost like a new literacy that we had to acquire. So my question is one of going forward. I mean, what and it's for everyone on the panel. The talk that was given by Professor Wang yesterday talked about this idea of usefulness and being a dance, and if you were a parent of a child interested in dance, you wonder, so what kind of a career prospects are these, and how is it going to be useful? So what do you suggest that we kind of assist with the idea of children wanting to pick a career in dance? What should they be thinking of? And also there is that question of whether or not it's necessary to have very big, broad scale dance sort of cohorts. I mean, isn't it rather special, especially that, using again the last example from Kerala, it's a huge commitment and a long time experience to be really well trained in dance. It's almost like being a geisha or being sumo. So it's a rather exclusive, selective career. So, I mean, going forward, I mean, what would you recommend that we look at this whole education of music for children that want to become professional dancers, is really my question.
It's really a great question, maybe for everyone. Yeah.
I'm going to give you a very layman answer. If you want your child to become an engineer, as a mother, I think you start that process very early, even though you might not be conscious of it. And similarly, if you want your child to become a chef, the process starts very, very early. The number of hours might not be equal to what you put into Kathakali, but you know, having your child in the kitchen and transmitting, you know, the love of food, the understanding, the nuances, the ingredients, etc., actually starts very early. Or even if you start later in your career, the number of hours you spend formally and non-formally refining that ability is actually, I really don't see any difference. It's just the value that the culture at that particular point in time puts on physical, you know, dance as a career, music as a career, cooking as a career. You know, it's just a value that the society puts on it, and it could be skewed by economics, it could be skewed by trending, it could be skewed by anything these days.
I think when you think of art, you can't think of in terms of usefulness. Art doesn't have to be useful. It's an expression. And coming from, you know, being an educator as well as an artist and researcher, I often grapple with this question about you saying, you know, coming to, for example, at Nanyang Academy of Fine Arts, and we have students coming to train as professional dancers. And often I get questions from these parents saying, you know, what are they going to do when they graduate? What are they going to do with this? As you know, as you say, what's its use? And I often evade that question and say that, again, art is not about usefulness, it's about expression. And if I believe that if you have a talent, and it is there for you to develop, and it's about, art is a reflection as well as a constructor of culture, of life. So in that sense, I think it is, if you must say what is its use, I feel that's the usefulness of art, of dance.
Any question? Oh, you want to pick up this question? Yeah. I think if I answer some questions, because I found I got inspirations from your speak, and because my background is architecture, so what I'm thinking about is the relations about the dance and the music and also digitals with architecture, because I think dancers, through the movement of body, then extend the space, and also give the space full of life, full of joy. And also from the architecture perspective, we always call that architecture is a kind of music, because some similarities between music and architecture, especially about the composition and the styles. When you talk about the Baroque architecture, that's really got deep influence from Baroque art and Baroque music. And also in this digital world, we find even you have never been to Canada, but you know the space, the place and the culture through the digital performance, digital presentation. So that means if you like the digital world, then you can stay at home and then you travel like a globalized person, and you can enjoy the happiness from this digital or virtual space. So that's what I understand from the this morning's session. I'm not sure whether it's right or not. In fact, I'm not so qualified enough to chair this session, but I learned a lot. Yeah. Any questions from the audience? Okay, thank you. Your question? Yeah.
In Kathakali dance, for a lay person, two things really stand out. One is the use of the color green for a face, for instance. And the other is that, and this one is very difficult for me, but I haven't figured it out, so I thought maybe I take this opportunity to ask. There is it an apparel? There's a structure that it could be a collar that goes around the face at about the level of the chin. What is it representative of? May I ask? Kathakali dance. Shall I repeat the question? I'm sorry about not asking so clearly. When I look at Kathakali dancing, right, two things really stand out. One is the use of the color green, color for face. So what does that represent? And the second is that there seems to be a structure. So I don't know whether it's apparel or what's the meaning of that. There seems to be a structure that goes around the chin of the face to give it a sideway effect. So I've always wondered about that and puzzled about that. Could you explain that to us?
Well, I couldn't hear clearly because of my bad eyes, but I hope you are tell about the framing of the face. Okay? Okay. Any Indian classical dance, you will find there is a great importance is given to the facial expression. So for the facial expression, and each part of India, it develops in different ways. But in our part of India, Kerala, the aesthetics, so artists who their creative mind might have worked. If you have a frame to a picture, that picture there will be a projection. You can get it projected if there is a frame. So it is a frame to the face, and that face, it became aesthetically, it became more and more created according to the design. When Kathakali's ways, everything is circular. If you watch a Kathakali picture, it is completely a circular form, and even the movements are circular. We start very basic training, how you move your wrist. From the wrist, it's a kind of exercise we begin with. And if you move the exercise, it is very small. And when you take that body also in that way, it makes more enlarged. And if you lose the eyes, it could be more enlarged. And that is a circular character is part of the Kathakalis. Probably this design is part of that. Everything there is a function, and at the same time, everything there is an aesthetic base. So for the aesthetic base, we don't know. It's very hard to be answered. If you say when a cartoonist write or draw a picture to make a face very happy, just one line, from one line you can see how the face is feel happy or sorrow. Just the lip only. So it's a kind of abstraction and it's a kind of stylization that applied in many art forms, but in Kathakali we do a kind of stylization and abstraction. So it is part of that, projecting the face to see the every subtle movement of the eyes, eyeballs and the cheek. We have very special exercises for all these muscles to make it how eyelids and chin, drooping the both sides. So like that, it's form of expression, expressive face.
Can I ask about the color? Why use green instead of say blue? Because when I go to temples, many times the color blue is used.
Why use the color of green rather than other colors? What is this? Colors. Makeup. Green. Why use
the green makeup, the color?
Yes.
Of course, there are a number of significance of colors in different art forms. But in Kathakali, green means represent good characters. Whereas red is the worst or the cruel characters. And in between, if we apply a green and red on the face, there are different type of characters. It represents partly it's a good character, partly it's a bad character. So the color has a message to the audience that what type of character is this. Okay.
I actually want to raise the question for lunch, for discussion over lunch, about basically what we saw the whole morning was how important is symbolism and abstractionism to the human mind, to the psyche, or to our brain. Why do we need it? What does it do to our brains? Why do we need to carry this symbolism, this abstractionism, this stylization of fact, of information, of even through digital, your whole experiment with the camera, etc. For me was an attempt to represent in another way this kind of re-representation and representation. How important is it to the human brain? Why is it there? What is it doing there? I'm not raising. I'm raising questions for lunch.
Then I have another question for lunch. We have been listening to dance descriptions and to some extent analysis or explanations, and in almost neither of the dance narratives, music was mentioned. We heard such different types of music during the dance. So I wonder if any of you dance experts could tell us a bit about the relationship between your dancers and dance students and dance colleagues with the music they hear while they dance. To start with, yesterday we heard such different types of music during the dances. The first and the third piece had a very strong amplified bass. The second piece was a very unamplified lute instrument, sort of oud, with a more Arabian sounding Islamic sort of melody. So I would be very interested on what type of music there is there and why we don't speak about it while describing dance.
That's an interesting discussion. Because time limited, if you raise any questions, maybe during the lunchtime. So if you don't want to talk, then we'll finish.
I found your reference to this morning, I'm sorry, or yesterday, I'm sorry I wasn't here, the usefulness. There are some things that we do that are just not useful, but they're extremely important. And that's human nature. The small things that I showed you, I think are useful because that's probably the only way they're going to survive. And because of the first exhibition we did on the textiles, the University of Malaya has chosen that to remount it again, the entire exhibition, for the celebration of its 111th anniversary in June and July of this year. And then we will also feature another version of it at a conference we're hosting at the end of the year. So in that way, the usefulness is that we can get it back out there into the public, make it known, create interest, and because of these kind of activities, Bangi, who told the story, who's 78 years old, had 3 young apprentices to start. She now has 12 because they realize that this is a livelihood that they can pursue, and it's ancestral, and it has meaning, and it has purpose, and it is useful at the same time. So that's part of the usefulness, I think. And the tools that we have now, for instance, I was telling the esteemed gentleman to my left that he should be motion captured as a master for the future, the same as they're doing in Hong Kong with the Kung Fu masters. Because when people who hold this knowledge die, it dies with them. And I've seen it happen over and over again. So we're hopeful that Bangi is going to be with us for a little while longer, because she has all kinds of stories in her head that are not being shared anymore. So usefulness, I think, is an interesting double-edged sword that we're grappling with on all kinds of levels. And these are just tools that we bring to it now.
I just built on this. Of course, the word usefulness or uselessness was related to the keynote lecture, the first yesterday, and it was attached to Chinese tradition of history and so forth. And of course, we discussed on it. I had the impression, again today, that we attached the sense of usefulness to the possibility of reviving or revitalizing or preserving some still living but endangered cultural tradition. And what about those traditions which died? We had some commentaries on this, the Chinese translation or some of the translations of heritage as what dead people left or what, relics, etc. Where's the historical dimension? So the historian is the figure, or let's say the history is a discipline that deals also with any longer existent phenomena to understand them. Why? Perhaps one simple answer could be because these phenomena are not really dead. They are just not visible. They live in other ways in our culture. And so I hope to have shown with two examples that did not survive, so Cyprus and Haiti, that they actually do survive in other forms of culture, which can only be explained and re-experienced by knowing their origin. So perhaps one more perspective is not only the still living cultures deserve to be preserved in heritage, but also those that don't live anymore.
We have to close this session. I hope our talks will be useful for our lunch because it's full of fun. Okay, see you in next session.